Hello! Welcome back. How are you today? The star of the Human Brain Show is here, as promised, the forebrain. We talked about the hindbrain and the midbrain in the previous video. Go on, check that one out too. So, just to remind you, this is a journey from the bottom to the top of the brain, exploring each part along the way. And the spotlight is on forebrain today. It's time to look deeper into what's lying in between these valleys and also underneath. The forebrain can be divided into two major sections, the Diencephalon and Telencephalon. There are other subdivisions under these two, such as the limbic system and the Basal Ganglia, both of which I will mention. And we'll start with the closest one to the midbrain, Diencephalon. Diencephalon is right above the midbrain and looks like this. There are two divisions I'll cover here, Thalamus and Hypothalamus. And oh boy, aren't these two so essential for us. Right here, we have what seems like a pair of mini lungs, the thalamus. Thalamus, as you can see, is in the center of our brains, which also makes it responsible for dividing the sensory information. Then the sensory input is processed in the cortex, except for one sense, smell. Smell bypasses the thalamus entirely, going straight to the olfactory bulb. Moreover, it's the only part of our brain that sleeps with us. Well, mostly. When you're in light sleep, it filters out sensory input to keep you undisturbed, but it goes mostly offline during deep sleep. How kind! If you want to wake someone up, you need to wake their thalamus first. Right under thalamus, we have hypothalamus, another tiny but incredibly powerful boss.
Hey, boss.
It regulates body temperature, keeps blood pressure in check, sends signals for hunger and thirst, and makes you aware when you feel full.
Oh, I know lots of things.
This little guy also controls the release of hormones through the pituitary gland, influencing mood, sex drive, growth, and stress responses.
Yes, but don't expect any cookie.
But what if I'm hungry?
No cookie.
There is so much going on in this small region, and it might be considered the crown jewel of our body's comfort. Okay, now let's continue with the weirdos. Take a look at the limbic system and the basal ganglia here. They look a little bizarre. However, as you can guess, again, their functions are pretty important. These two brain regions play crucial roles in regulating emotions, motor skills, and learning. And we will dive into each one, focusing more on their most prominent parts. There are so many itsy-bitsy ones here. Can you see these two little beans? Aw, look at them. Aren't they so cute? Think again. They're your anxiety beans. They remind me of the evil twins in The Shining. Ugh, chilling. That's what amygdala actually does. It gives you the chills. It's responsible for intense emotions like aggression, fear, and anxiety. When something threatens you, the amygdala kicks in, making sure you react fast. Ever seen someone being punched after a scare prank? That's the amygdala in action. Quick, survival mode reactions. But let's not judge amygdala so harshly. Fear is necessary for survival. Would staring back at a tiger calmly be helpful back in the day? Amygdala essentially asks, is there a threat? And makes sure you react to it. As I mentioned, amygdala also controls anxiety. There aren't any wild animals trying to numb us these days, but we've got other problems, like soul-crushing expenses. It makes sense, since anxiety can simply be defined as a fear response without an apparent threat. Fun fact! Electrical stimulation of the amygdala evokes both fear and anxiety responses in humans. Awesome! Additionally, the amygdala is active when we learn through fear and conditioning. Constantly triggering students' amygdala might not yield the best results in the learning process, and we don't want that. Right? Right? Here we have the hippocampus, Latin for seahorse. Does it look like a seahorse? I guess it does, kinda. The hippocampus is crucial for creating and retrieving long-term memories. This was famously observed in the case of HM, who underwent surgery to treat his epilepsy, resulting in the removal of most of his hippocampus. After the operation, he could no longer form new long-term memories, although his cognitive abilities remained largely intact. Other cases of hippocampal damage have shown similar correlations with long-term memory loss, revealing its vital role in memory processing, la-di-da, and voila! Now we understand the hippocampus's strong connection to long-term memories. But does that mean we store all our memories there? Not quite. Different types of memories engage various brain regions. For instance, the cerebellum helps you learn kinesthetic skills and stores procedural memories related to movements. The hippocampus primarily handles episodic memories, events in our lives, and a bit of semantic memory, which involves factual information. The hippocampus is on duty all day as we experience this life and weave what we consider our past. On a related note, try this. Touch something right now. Your screen, your mug, or your nose. I don't know. If you could do it, that's thanks to hippocampus. A bit. It calculates the position of your fingers relative to what you want to touch, and there you go. Move your hands middle with all the objects of the world. So the hippocampus also aids in spatial navigation. That's another one of its tricks. One last fun fact. We start forming memories around the age of 3, 4, because that's when the hippocampus develops. You can't remember what you were doing when you were 1, can you? Because you didn't have a fully grown seahorse back then. Let's continue with basal ganglia. Basal ganglia regulates motor functions, procedural learning, and emotional processes. Let me elaborate a bit. The basal ganglia helps control smooth, purposeful movements by inhibiting unwanted movement and fine-tuning motor activity. It also plays a key role in motor learning, especially for the development of automatic movements, such as riding a bike or typing on a keyboard. Procedural learning involves getting accustomed to carrying out some tasks in a regular row, which becomes automatic over time. Some parts of the basal ganglia control reward-based learning and motivation through dopamine release. This system plays a role in addiction and motivation by linking actions to rewards. This one doesn't sound so helpful. So that was the basal ganglia. We all know we have 2 hemispheres in our brains. So are these 2 hemispheres floating separately? Well, the answer is obviously no. There is a bridge in between. It's called Corpus Callosum. It's a thick layer of nerve tracts providing the communication of 2 halves. The term corpus callosum means tough body in Latin, and I think it fits perfectly. Now it's the time to untangle the yarn at the top. Holy moly guacamole, it's time to hail the cerebral cortex. Our cerebral cortex consists of 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes. Let's start with the closest one to our forehead. This part can be considered a chunky boy because it makes up 10% of the brain's volume. Rightfully so, because it has so many things to handle at once. Broadly speaking, frontal lobe makes sense of the data collected in the other regions of the brain and uses it to set higher order functions such as planning, decision-making, problem-solving, reasoning, and goal-setting. That's quite a lot. It helps individuals anticipate future consequences of their actions and make appropriate choices. Now you know who's to blame. Your frontal lobe. It also helps you maintain your attention and ignore distractions. Focus, stay on track, and achieve your goal.
Stop. Are you playing the Muffin Man or the Garbage Man? Huh? Do you know the Garbage Man? Because I do, because I'm looking right at him. Again. 5, 6, 7, 8.
That's what it says. Imagine you're trying to remember a PIN code just long enough to type it on an app. As you whisper the numbers to yourself repeatedly, the prefrontal cortex is activated. Because it's also on duty when we're forming working memories, aka short-term memories, and also storing them. Moreover, it's involved in social cognition, which includes reading the room, empathizing with others, and making social judgments. What comes after quietly assessing a situation in your brain? Reacting to it. Frontal lobe is active here too because it regulates your impulses, emotional responses, and the inhibition of improper behavior. Let's say you see your partner talking to a Handsome Squidward? Maybe it's because of the chin, or the muscles, or the irresistible charisma. You can't help feeling a little jealous. What are you going to do now? Will you solely listen to your limbic system and punch him in the face and throw a tantrum? Or will you use your frontal lobe and act civilly, perhaps joining them in the conversation and see the situation first? Thanks to our frontal lobe's reasoning, we can evaluate circumstances and choose to act logically. I told you, frontal lobe is responsible for a lot of things. Moving on! Next, we have the parietal lobe, located at the crown of the brain. This lobe here is responsible for processing tactile sensations such as touch, pressure, temperature, and pain from different parts of the body. Imagine touching something soft like a blanket, or something slippery like a soap, or an accidental kiss from a turtle. All this information is received and processed by the parietal lobe. Now, let's take a look at the front side of the parietal lobe, known as the somatosensory cortex. It receives sensory information through pathways from the brainstem and thalamus and forms real cognitive awareness of the sensory input. Interestingly, each part of the somatosensory cortex corresponds to a specific area of the body, with more sensitive ones such as the fingertips and lips occupying larger cortical regions. What's this abomination? You're looking at the sensory homunculus, demonstrating more sensitive parts of our bodies larger. I drew this. Hated every second of it. Ugh. In addition to that, the parietal lobe, especially the somatosensory region, is activated while we're using fine motor skills, such as writing, typing, using scissors, drawing, coloring. Did you notice how many parts of our brains work in collaboration just to get you to move your body?
The mind has to wrap around the foot.
That's some real hard work. Apart from that, all regions of the parietal lobe help you interact with the world by determining your body's position in space. It helps us orient ourselves, perceive depth and distance, and navigate ourselves in our environment, like a personal GPS. It's there for us when we try to make sense of our existence in this three-dimensional world. And surprise, surprise, math is processed in this region. Yep, numbers. The plot thickens. What's that behind your ear? Whoop! A coin? No, it's your temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is right behind your ears, and as you can guess, one of its roles is to process auditory information. Sounds, pitches, frequencies all find meaning in your temporal lobe. It identifies sounds, locates their sources, and can even filter out unwanted noises to focus on specific ones. Certain regions of the temporal lobe are also involved in processing music. Of course, that's not the only thing it does. Since hippocampus and temporal lobe are close to each other, the temporal lobe also plays a role in long-term memory processing, as the information received is funneled through the temporal cortex into the hippocampus to create long-term memories. We're talking about not only storing events and information, but also recognizing the familiar faces and objects. An elephant never forgets, right? That's probably because they have a huge temporal lobe and also a bigger hippocampus. That remarkable memory might be because of a survival mechanism that helps them thrive over many years. Last but not least, we can find two regions responsible for language comprehension and production around here: Wernicke and Broca. Broca is actually not in the temporal lobe. But when it comes to language, Wernicke and Broca go hand in hand, so I wanted to cover them both here. Both areas are typically found in the left hemisphere, as they reside in the dominant hemisphere, which for the majority of people is the left. How do they work? Broca is responsible for language production, meaning that when you speak or write, this part is active. The counterpart, Wernicke, is mainly responsible for auditory language comprehension. If you can understand what I'm saying, that's thanks to Wernicke. Temporal lobe is precious. And the last one, right at the back of our heads, the occipital lobe. This region handles all visual information. Colors, patterns, shapes, motion, it's all processed here. Occipital lobe is also the mind's eye. First, with the visual memories. It plays a role in forming and retrieving visual memories. It helps us remember and recognize visual stimuli we have encountered before. Secondly, as a personal projector. Whenever you try to visualize something in your mind, it's activated. A lake, a ghost, butterflies. The image in your skull cinema is sponsored by your occipital lobe. It's fascinating, right? So, simply everything to do with seeing is here. Okay, but why is it so far, far away from the eyes? You would think it would be more efficient for the occipital lobe to be near the eyes, right? Well, at least that's what I thought. Confusing, but there's an answer. See, it's actually positioned in a safe spot, cushioned by the cerebellum, membranes, and skull. Plus, it doesn't need to be physically close, thanks to the optic nerves and thalamus. Okay, listen, I'll tell you about something very weird now. There's a slight delay in how we perceive the world. That's because of the distance between where a stimulus occurs and where the brain processes it. Sensory information travels through the peripheral nervous system, into the thalamus, and then to the relevant brain regions. Because of this distance, it takes milliseconds for the brain to process the information. In short, we live slightly in the past with no escape.
What?
If you and I touch the table at the same time, and if your arms are longer than mine, yep, you process that touch a little later than I did, or vice versa. You get the deal. This is called perceptual latency. Well, it's the details like this that make me lose my mind. That's about it. We covered all the major brain parts and their functions. We made it! We made it. Also, last but not least, let's not forget our brains actually work as a community. Yes, some parts are observed more active during some certain actions, but if you can stay alive, use your senses, and react to your surroundings in your own unique way, that's thanks to a communal work of all parts. Some focus more dominantly on performing in a certain way, that's why some actions are attributed to those parts. Also, even though we've come so far and advanced in scanning methods, we still don't quite understand some mechanisms in our brains. We still have a lot to discover. By the way, who said we only use 10% of our brains? I know it sounds believable when it's Morgan Freeman's voice, but that's not true. We don't just use 10% of our brains. Why would we keep that amount of useless tissue in our bodies? It doesn't make sense. It's not. It can't. What's that smell? Smells like bull. Okay, I'm good. In the next part, we will discover more about learning. Till then, take care and be careful. Don't get eaten by sharks or skeletons. It's spooky season. Outros are hard. Still. Bye!